Hi, I'm Alicia.
And I'm Robin, and you're listening to Bowel Moments,
the podcast sharing real talk about the realities of IBD. Served on the rocks. Hey everybody, I'm Alicia Barron, and I am your co-host for Bowel Moments.
And I'm Robin Kingham, joining Alicia Barron for this crazy, fun, informative podcast.
If you can't tell by our voices, we're really kind of excited to do this. So Bowel Moments is intended to be an informative and fun podcast that's all about inflammatory bowel disease, but also that has a little side of drinking and fun on the side. So Robin and I are going to be interviewing people living with inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's or ulcerative colitis or indeterminate colitis, and also people that take care of those folks, or our doctors and nurse practitioners and folks like that. Because we want to get lots of people's opinions on and ideas and stories about inflammatory bowel disease and maybe why they are involved in the care of it or what their stories have been like living with these diseases. So I'm really excited, Robin. I'm so excited.
Me too. Yes, we're doing real talk about the realities of IBD. Served on the rocks. Yeah.
On the rocks. I love it.
Although I'm not drinking a drink that's on the rocks today.
Mine is not on the rocks either.
Yeah. It's okay.
That's okay. Maybe for the next round. Yeah. So Robin, when you and I got talking about this, one of the reasons I said I wanted to do this podcast is that I kind of felt like there wasn't a lot of podcasts out there. It didn't feel like that were really about inflammatory bowel disease. And I thought it would be really fun to do something that was like a little smaller. And my original idea was to do something that was super small and like serious and like about a very specific aspect of living with IBD. And then you said you wanted to help, and we've definitely moved away from that.
We have. I said I wanted to help, and then we came up, I think you said, wouldn't it be funny to get a doctor drunk and interview them? And then that's how we added the alcohol to this. And I feel like we're going in the right direction though.
I think so. I think being a little more lighthearted about this is going to be fun. Yes. I also feel like we'll potentially get different and better stories, perhaps.
I think so too.
Lubrication.
A little bit more honesty, a little bit more transparency, maybe.
Yes. And I love the fact that this was your idea. I mean, I think it makes sense, but it's your idea to bring in people actually living with these diseases who, can tell their stories about living with them and give some tips and pointers to those folks that are also being diagnosed with these diseases. And so I'm excited for that aspect. I think that it's going to add a very different layer to it. And frankly, also, it's just going to be fun to get to know some of these people that we know, but on a little bit deeper of a level and with a little bit of, again, helpful lubrication.
That's right. I saw this meme one time, makes me think of it. And I mean this in the best possible way, but sometimes when you go to see a professional and they don't specialize in what you have, they don't necessarily know exactly what's going on. So it's your 1 hour of class time on IBD does not trump my 20 years of living with it. So I thought it was important to bring in that patient perspective because I feel like I should have a degree in a fellowship in IBD, a residency in IBD after living with it for 20 years.
For sure.
So I thought it would be good to have both perspectives.
You're right. Living with this disease for this long and frankly, kind of going this convoluted path that you have taken to get to your final diagnosis even is sort of, a good part of that, which is why, frankly, Robin Kingham, you are our first guest on Bowel Moments.
So exciting.
I know. I thought, what a great way to get started, because I don't live with inflammatory bowel disease. It just happens to be a world that I've been living in for a while now. And I've gotten to meet so many fantastic people. And I just think it's so interesting. But I mean, you have inflammatory bowel disease. And so that's how, unfortunately, you're a part of our membership, whether you like it or not. So, and I want you to kind of talk a little bit about your story. And then I'm going to ask you questions as I sort of think of them.
Okay. So I was diagnosed 20 years ago with ulcerative colitis. My youngest daughter turned 1 while I was in the hospital. We celebrated her first birthday in the family visiting room at William Beaumont Hospital in Troy, Michigan. And it has been a roller coaster since then. During that hospital stay, I was in the hospital for 21 days and I ended up having almost all of my colon removed.
Wow.
I have 4 inches of my rectum left. So I have lived for 20 years without a colon. I have what's called an IRA, which means ileal rectal anastomosis. My ileum, which is the very end of your small intestines, is connected right to what's left of my rectum. And so I've been like that for 20 years. Most people who have surgery, colon surgery nowadays, have J pouches or, some kind of pouch built. Or if their entire colon's gone, they might have an ostomy. I did actually have an ostomy for a year, a temporary ostomy, because I was so sick, they had to wait a year before they could do the follow-up surgery. So after surgery, I will tell you, you feel amazing. Like, you have been so sick before that, then after surgery, you feel amazing. So I felt good for quite a while. And even when I started to feel bad again, it wasn't as bad. So I was just like, I'm fine, because it's not nearly as bad as I was before. So I went for years like that. Oh, I should say too, that after the pathology report came back from that surgery, they changed my diagnosis from ulcerative colitis to indeterminate colitis. There's about 15% of cases where they can't tell. So when the pathology report came back, they were just like, we can't tell which one this is. So I say ulcerative colitis, but it was really, officially my diagnosis was changed to indeterminate. And I guess about 2 years ago, after being on the roller coaster for that long, about 2 years ago, I was in a serious flare again. Pain in new places, like I knew there was something really wrong, and my diagnosis got changed to Crohn's. Mm-hmm. So I have had countless scopes, scope prep, my favorite thing, all kinds of tests, blood tests and CT scans and MRIs and, with contrast and drinking barium and all of that stuff. It's just normal. It's just like how life is. I am grateful that there's a lot more treatments nowadays, because when my diagnosis changed, I was like, oh no, they can't take out my stomach. Right. I kind of need that. They can't take that out. So what are they going to do? So being able to have options for medication, which we didn't have 20 years ago, mm-hmm. it makes me a little bit more hopeful, and hopeful for other patients too. I mean, it's a roller coaster. It's definitely a roller coaster, and it's a long roller coaster.
Yeah, it's like a roller coaster you can't get off of, sadly, too.
Yes, that's better. It's a roller coaster you can't get off of. Yes.
Out of curiosity, there is a grieving process no matter what happens. Like when you get a diagnosis of a chronic illness, that's what I was trying to say. There's a grieving process that goes along with it, because you're sort of, you're mourning
the life that you thought you were going to have.
Right, exactly. So out of curiosity, so you had to have that mourning process, and thinking you had indeterminate colitis, ulcerative colitis, and then 18 years later you had to kind of have that same process again, but because you got a different diagnosis. Was it similar? Was it different? Did you just sort of take it in stride? What was your reaction to the change in diagnosis?
I will tell you, so initially when I was very first diagnosed, surgery, all that stuff, just grateful. I had 2 small children. I had a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. Grateful to still be just alive, like so grateful to be alive. But it also shifted my paradigm. I did not look at life the same way. I wasn't willing to accept things that I had been previously willing to accept. I was going to live life on my terms, because honestly, at that point, I almost died. So I was not willing to sacrifice anything anymore. Like, I was living life to the fullest. So when my diagnosis changed, I had a little bit of that too. And I actually had to talk to my husband about it and say, look, I'm going to have this sense of urgency, like that I need to go out and do things. When I'm feeling good, I'm going to want to have adventures and do crazy things and go places. And I don't mean like really crazy things. I just mean travel and see things and go places, because I have that, my life is short again, kind of just sense of urgency. So I really had to sit him down and just explain to him what was going to be happening with me over the next course of the next few months after they changed my diagnosis, because I really have that, I need to go live life because I feel good right now. So I need to go live as much life as I can.
Yeah. That's, wow. I'm sure that would have been freeing in a lot of ways, because you're right. It puts things into a very different perspective and makes you understand that sadly life is a little bit fleeting. And so you do have to kind of reach out and grab those moments when you can. So I feel like what a gift in a lot of ways, what a terrible package it came in,
It's totally a gift. I am so grateful. This is going to sound crazy. Maybe you should have a sip of your beverage.
I was going to say, drink up. All right.
I am so grateful for my diagnosis. And now I'm going to start crying. I'm going to cry on the first episode.
I was like, I'm getting teary too. This is terrible. We haven't drank that much, Robin. This is not.
I am so grateful for my diagnosis. I would not be the woman I am today if I hadn't been diagnosed with ulcerative colitis 20 years ago. If I didn't have to go through the hardships that I had to go through with small children, trying to take care of them, and then being a single parent with chronic illness and taking care of them, and then getting sick all over again years later and having to try to figure out what it is and go through the process of getting a second opinion and driving 6 hours to see the doctor that I want to see. I mean, it's just, I would not be the person I am today without all of those experiences. I don't know who I would be, and I don't want to find out. I like this version of me.
Yeah.
This version of me had to go through all of that.
And this is a version we all love. So I think we'll take it, right? I think, so you talk about sort of parenting small children. Your girls were young, super young when you started to go through this. So I'm curious if you think it changed your parenting style, because having parented one kid, for 3 years prior to your diagnosis, did it change your parenting style? Did it change kind of how you interact with your kids in any way?
I would love to say yes, but I don't know who I would have been.
Yeah.
I don't know who I would have been as they got older. I would say probably so.
Okay.
Probably so. I asked myself through their growing up, I asked myself a lot, is this the hill I'm going to die on today? No. I'm just going to let them, whatever this is, it's not that important kind of thing. So they were sheltered when they were younger. Like my girls were, I was very careful about that. And I don't even know why I was very careful about that. They were pretty sheltered when they were younger, but I was not so strict. I wasn't so strict because I was like, in the grand scheme of things, how important is this?
Yeah.
And I asked myself that a lot over the course of their lives. And I feel like, it comes off as a more laid back way of parenting, but if you ask my girls, I don't think that they would agree with that.
No, and some of our conversations about your daughters, I think perhaps they would not say that you were a laid back parent or a laissez-faire parent.
Right.
I think they probably would say you were very attentive in your parenting. Not, I wouldn't say strict necessarily, but I think maybe they were just, they'd say you were careful. But I'm excited because your daughters have agreed to, at least one of your daughters.
No, they both have.
Okay, good. I was like, both of your daughters have agreed to come on the podcast at some point so we can talk about sort of, and maybe I'll do that and you could not come in that one to talk on this podcast. I do think it's interesting. So I grew up, my dad had a chronic illness. And so, he was diagnosed when I was 16. So not when I was a baby and like your girls, but it is different. It is different, having a parent with a chronic illness and sort of growing up in an environment, where you have somebody whose medical condition can change day to day, and in his case, like it was the same thing. It was, we could wake up tomorrow and circumstances would be very different. And so having that as part of your family, to be frank, it's like this uninvited guest that's sitting at your table and
Yes.
it was there and it kind of sucks and you kind of want it to go away. And most of the time you really want it to go away, but you kind of never know what's going to happen. And so it's different. I feel like it adds a layer in. And I love that your girls seem like they've really taken this and turned it into sort of, they're very empathetic and they've turned it into like, careers that are playing on their empathy and that, so I think that's really cool to see.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
So I'm going to rewind you back a little bit because you also were very involved with your family business as well.
Yeah.
And that was during this time, right?
Yes. Yes.
Talk to me a little bit, because that means like your diagnosis and sort of how this played out was very visible, and not just your immediate like little your daughter's sort of family, but like your whole family. So
Right.
how does that play out for everybody else?
My family's in the restaurant business, or they were in the restaurant business. My parents have since retired, and I worked at the restaurant I guess I started working at their restaurant. I was diagnosed in 2000. And I moved back home in 2002. So I started working at the restaurant in 2002, and it actually helped me a lot because of the hours. It was a breakfast and lunch place. And so it made it easier for me to take care of my girls as a single parent, working hours that they would be in school. But it was very visible because my parents they spoke about, what was when I was sick with like their customers and their close friends. So a lot of people knew what, from their perspective, what I had gone through, just a couple of years before. So it was by no means a secret. It was not anything that I could keep secret at all, which is fine. I mean, I never wanted to hide it. I didn't know it was something that I never thought of it as something that I should be ashamed of. But at that point, I also was like, well, I feel better now, so I'm fine. Like in my brain, I had shut off the fact that I had a chronic illness. It was just, I had surgery, I feel better, I'm fine. And,
right.
That's just how I went. I actually used to tell myself all the time, suck it up and figure it out. Like whenever I wasn't feeling good, whenever anything was going wrong internally, I would literally say out loud, suck it up and figure it out.
Yeah.
And then just not acknowledge it at all and just move on.
I mean, that's definitely a way of coping. Unfortunately, I don't know that always does.
Not the best way to cope. No, I am the first person to admit that is not the best way to cope at all.
Listen, I'm glad you said that because, listen, I'm not a therapist. I'm not your therapist. And so I'm definitely happy you said that because you're right. Unfortunately, and this was the environment I grew up in, was the suck it up and figure it out environment. Mm-hmm. Frankly, I feel like as a child of the late 70s, early 80s, this is our generation. It's the suck it up and figure it out generation.
Yep.
Here's the key to the house. Let yourself in and feed yourself generation.
Right. Typical latchkey kid, right?
Yeah, I feel like that's part of it. But that idea really stems from a place too, where like typically when people have surgery, it's like, it's a surgery, like you get your appendix out and you're done and you feel better and that's the end of it. Like, so that is kind of, surgery feels like the end game where it's like, this is the thing that happens and then the thing is done and it's removed and everything is fine now, and so you're right. And especially since you feel so much better after surgery, cool, I'm back to normal. Everything's fine now. And you're right. Unfortunately, it doesn't take away the fact that you're still living with this thing that doesn't go away, and so
it doesn't go away.
It takes a while to kind of get your head wrapped around the fact that supposedly you've got this cure, this thing has happened, but maybe not. Maybe not. And I had a wake-up call. I don't know if it was 2 years later, maybe it was 2004-ish. I had to go back in and I had outpatient surgery because I had problems with scar tissue. And so it wasn't necessarily IBD related, but it was surgery related. And there's problems. And even now, I guess now that I know as much as I know about IBD, there are things that I acknowledge that I completely ignored that were a direct result of my IBD, extraintestinal manifestations, like stuff that happened that I just wrote off to something else that I now know, as a 20-year veteran, you were being a dummy. That was because of your IBD. Like, you should have probably gone in to see your doctor. That's hard though. I mean, because unfortunately, some of the extraintestinal manifestations that happen with, with inflammatory bowel disease can be written off so easily.
Yes.
Oh, I'm just tired, and oh, by the way, you're anemic, or, oh, I just got something in my eye and it turns out it's something different, or I've got this weird rash, it'll go away, no biggie, and same thing happened, with my dad, where there was just stuff that would happen and he'd be like, not a big deal. And it turned out it actually was, something that should have been addressed. And
exactly. I fully acknowledge that now. I admit it. But it also makes me the kind of person who tells my children, okay, let's go get that checked out.
Good.
Let's go get that checked out. Why don't you make an appointment with your doctor? I don't let them sit on things.
Right. Well, that's good.
I know better.
It's good that that's the takeaway from that. And I'm imagining they also took that away too. I mean, because I certainly now, having grown up again in that environment where like the chronic illness was there and these things kind of got either sort of chalked up to it or like got sort of passed off as nothing. I might be the first person to go, you know what, I'm not gonna sit and wait. I am gonna check this thing out because I do know that it could be something bigger. So either I'm a hypochondriac or I don't know. I haven't quite figured this out yet. But there's a ripple. Unfortunately, there's a ripple of how this affects everybody in your family.
Yeah, it really does.
So now, one of the other things I was thinking about when you were sort of telling your story, because I've worked with people that have had to move, and I also have worked with a lot of people that I understand how deep the relationship is that you have with your doctor, that you've had, especially because, it takes a lot of trust and a lot of sort of figuring things out with your gastroenterologist. And so a lot of our folks really have very deep connections to their gastroenterologist. You've lived a number of places and you are yourself a little bit of a nomad, so a self-described nomad. And so how do you do that? Like, how do you get to the point where you feel comfortable sort of moving to the next one? Or how do you sort of help choose the next gastroenterologist you're going to go to when you get to a new place?
So I rely heavily on recommendations, and I'm fortunate that I have several family members who are, my cousin is a nurse, my sister is a nurse. So I was living in Michigan when I was diagnosed, and my surgeon up there, whom I adore, the man saved my life. When I moved from there back home, my cousin was a nurse at a big hospital system. And I said, who's the gastroenterologist who's seeing IBD patients? And so that's how I found that person. And then when I got to the point where I needed a second opinion because I knew something was different, and all the tests that we were running the results were not what I knew was happening in my own body. I knew I had to find somebody else who actually specialized in IBD and only treated IBD. I asked a friend.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of how people get a lot of their referrals. And I think that's why, there's a lot of things online and support groups online and things like that, that, people do start to, and even though, they might be discouraged from saying my doctor's the best doctor ever, I know there's a lot of that happens because people do have these really deep relationships. And
I think the hardest part when you have the really deep relationship, which I went through, and I know several people personally who I've recommended other doctors to, or even just said, I'm going to need you to get a second opinion.
Right.
Like really just put my mom voice on and said, this is not right. You're rooting for your doctor. This person has been they're on your team. Yeah. And you've been working together to manage this for however many years that you've been working together to manage it. And I feel like there's some guilt on the patient side for wanting to get a second opinion. But every doctor who I've talked to about second opinions, they're always like, I will send you back to your doctor. I'm just consulting. Yeah. So if you are not feeling well, everyone out there, if you're not feeling well, get a second opinion. Because there's so many treatments nowadays, there's so many options, there's so many options with complementary and alternative care, integrative medicine, functional medicine. There's so many things out there that can all work together to help you feel better. And no matter how much you have a bromance with your doctor, if you're not feeling well, you should just ask them, is there something that we could be doing different? Is there something that we could be doing more? Because I really should be feeling better.
That's really valuable. And I think also, like you said, most doctors worth their salt are really going to say, like, if you say, I want to go get a second opinion, they're going to say, great, go do it. Because chances are very good that if they know what they're doing, the other doctor is going to say, yeah, I agree with the treatment plan. Or maybe this new person can come up with a different plan that can help this other person that's gotten a little bit stymied, by kind of what's going on. So, I think all of the doctors that I know are certainly not afraid of second opinions.
That's right.
I think but you're right. I think it feels disloyal to, go get that. And maybe even to some of these doctors, it's really hard to say, like, you should go get a second opinion because you do feel like, I do know this case so well and I think I can figure it out. And so I'm guessing on both sides, it's kind of one of those where you get a little bit stuck in the relationship and maybe get stuck a little bit too close to each other,
Yeah. I think another point to add to that is that if the gastroenterologist that you're seeing treats IBD but is not a specialist, they may not be up to date on the latest that's happening. And I don't mean like you need to change and you have to go see an IBD specialist or anything like that, but there are so many advances happening so quickly in IBD. There's so many of it. I can't even put it into words. There's so many things happening on the research level, diagnostic tools, everything just to increase the quality of care for us. So if your doctor is not an IBD specialist, or a large portion of their practice isn't IBD patients, it might just be good to get a second opinion from a specialist so that you have that person on your care team.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. You're right. And I think that's what makes inflammatory bowel disease so exciting. This is why it's such an interesting area to be in, and so such interesting diseases, because stuff changes so quickly and so often. But you're right, if you're a general practice gastroenterologist, trying to keep up with the latest that's happening in IBD, but also celiac, but also GERD, and all these other things that you see is really hard. And so frankly, that's why it's great to go see a specialist, that this is what they do. This is their baby. And then they can kind of go back and help your gastroenterologist understand that maybe those older medications are not the best choice right now, and maybe changing it, and then being able to have them sort of take that plan and continue it with you sort of moving forward makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. I mean, in general, medical science is moving so quickly now that it really is hard to go see somebody who's just a generalist, and feel like you're really getting the latest latest and greatest care.
Agreed.
Yeah. But it's also what makes this so exciting.
Who thought that putting cameras up people's butts would be exciting?
Or swallowing a camera in a pill.
Yes.
That is, to me, super fascinating, because there was this old movie that I'm thinking of where people went into a submarine in somebody's body. What is that movie? I think I'm just making, there is
Honey, I Shrunk the Kids?
No, maybe. Well, they did it in I Shrunk the Kids too.
They did it in a TV show, an episode oh my gosh.
I know, right? There's something where they go into people's bodies, and all I can think of is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and that's clearly not it, because we're not a sea. So obviously,
but there was a submarine in that.
There is a submarine. Thank you. Yeah, I haven't had that much champagne, but yes, there's something where they go into people's bodies, and it's they're in basically a submarine. I was and every time I think of this pill cam, that's all I can think of is people in a tiny submarine.
Oh my God. I will never think of it any other way now. Thank you very much.
Doesn't it sound fun though? There's a part of it that's that would be super fascinating to go down the entire system and take pictures. So maybe someday my dream can be realized.
You want to be shrunk and put in a mini submarine and
just temporarily.
Okay.
And maybe just in yours, because it'll go a little faster since you're missing.
That's right.
You're missing.
I don't have 6 feet of colon. It'd be much faster.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. This things I never thought I'd say to anybody.
Yes. I feel like we didn't stay on track at all for this first episode.
We hadn't really set a track, so perhaps
we're kind of winging it. Yeah.
That's not true. Okay, it is. Yeah. No, we are. But I am excited to be able to just talk to people, because I think, one of the most interesting things is to really try to find out why somebody is either involved, for our doctors, why did they choose this profession? Because if you think about it, of all
of that all the time, why did you pick GI, or specifically IBD? Why did you pick specifically IBD?
Right. Yeah.
I'm fascinated.
I know, me too, because I really do feel there's parts of your body that might be different and maybe even easier to work with. We're talking your digestive tract is massive, that's a lot of space to really work with, whereas, listen, if you're a dermatologist, I've only got so much skin, right? So.
Right. And it's all visible. It's all.
Exactly. Yeah, and you're not having to stick cameras anywhere for the most part.
You can just do a little up and down. I can see the front, turn around, I can see the back.
Exactly. And the other thing is you mentioned, I didn't think I needed to be ashamed of this, but frankly, there are a lot of people ashamed about the fact that this is a poop disease, or that.
Oh my gosh, I think that's not that they're hilarious. I get through life one bathroom joke at a time.
Right.
One poop joke at a time. My whole family does that. My dad still asks me when I go to the bathroom, you have to go to the bathroom again? And I'm like, Dad, 20 years, still no colon, didn't grow back. We get through, I feel like maybe that's what's made me what I am too, is sense of humor. You have to be able to laugh at it. Yeah. Otherwise, I feel like you'd be crying a lot.
And I feel like that's generally and you and I have met a lot of people that work professionally in this world. And I think that in general, it feels like that's the commonality amongst all of the people that we work with is either genuinely lovely people, like super, super nice people, or they have a really great sense of humor. Or
Yes.
a combination of the two. They happen to be lovely people with a great sense of humor, which is even better. But I do feel like that's like, to me, that's been the thread that sort of combined, like that sort of follows through all of these people, is they're these folks that just kind of, roll with it and are funny and sort of caring people. And so that's been really fun to be part of and to get to know as I've gotten to know more people living with these diseases, but also been part of this world a little bit longer, is just sort of try understanding the people that sort of get involved.
Yes. Yeah.
So it'll be fun to talk to them and kind of get their side of it as well.
I can't wait. I literally can't wait to start talking to other people about their experiences, about why they chose IBD. My husband had to have his 5-year colonoscopy last week, 2 weeks ago, something like that. And he used to be a submariner, and he was talking to his doctor about submarine movies, the most accurate submarine movie, and they made a down Periscope joke right before he went in for his colonoscopy. So yeah. You have to have a sense of humor.
I feel like you have to have a sense of humor in this business for sure. I agree with you. I think that's really funny. And at some point, I had thought of something and about your husband and getting his most recent colonoscopy and about how now he kind of finally knows what it's like. And
you say he knows what it's like, but it's like every 5 years or something that he has to get one. And if it hadn't been for the pandemic, I would have already had one this year, and I have one scheduled in, later this year. So that would have been 2 in a year. So I really don't feel like that's the same thing at all.
I will tell you, I have only had to, I've had to have a colonoscopy once, and I will tell you, colon prep was like a traumatic experience for me. Like,
that's what we should call our cocktails. Colon prep.
We should totally call them colon prep. I love that. Yes. So yeah, every guest that comes on, they have to give us their colon prep recipe. Is that?
I feel like that's appropriate.
I don't know. I might just stick with champagne. But maybe they can make their own colon prep. Because like I said, that was traumatic for me.
Yes. I will say this. You're sticking with champagne. I'm drinking cider. And don't come at me, anyone out there telling me that I shouldn't drink because I have Crohn's disease. I don't drink that often, and cider doesn't bother me. So that is what I'm going to be drinking. So don't come at me.
No, exactly. And we're not sponsored by any alcohol companies.
No. No, we are not.
We're going to just put that out there. So, and I think, frankly, I'm kind of excited to hear our guests' preferences as they come on, because, for the most part, everybody I've met is not somebody I typically drink with. And so I'm kind of excited to just, hear what everybody's drinking. And I'm excited about our guest list. I mean, that's one of the things you and I have spent, a decent amount of time getting excited about and working on, is inviting some of our friends to come join us. And I think we've got a really fun group of people that are going to come on and talk about, living with these diseases and sort of, navigating life with inflammatory bowel disease, and also, some of our healthcare providers about like, why do they get involved in stuff? So I'm really excited for this podcast. This is silly how excited I am about this.
I know, it really is silly. Yes. You think there's so many podcasts out there. Why would we do that? And then you look and you realize, well, there's really not that many podcasts about IBD out there.
Right. Well, and they're also maybe they're not as funny as ours, because I feel like once we get these folks loosened up, they're going to be pretty darn funny.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I
mean, and if they're not, we can edit out that part.
We'll add in some jokes about.
That's right.
1,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I don't know. I got nothing.
The little drums in the background, but a bunch.
Oh, I like that. That might take a little bit of editing work on my part.
We'll figure it out.
We will. I'm trying to think if there's any other questions that I think. Well, so the nice thing about this is, since you're going to be my co-host, I get to keep asking you questions.
Yes, you do.
I know. And especially once your daughters come on, and also we have invited your sister, I think, to come join us as well as a nurse, to bring us a different perspective.
She was there. Like when I was hospitalized the first time, we actually both lived. She was in nursing school. She was going through her clinical rotation when I was diagnosed and in the hospital. So the doctor would tell me one thing about my diagnosis and she'd go home and research it and then come back to the hospital the next day with like just printed sheets of paper for me to read about, so we could figure out what this was, you know. It was,
Yeah.
yeah, I just thought of that with you saying that. Like, I hadn't thought about that in years and years. But yeah, so she's not a GI nurse right now, but she was a GI nurse for years and years. So we're going to ask her questions about that, but then also like what it was like for her to have to take me to the hospital when I was so weak. She had to go get a wheelchair to wheel me in when they admitted me because I couldn't walk. Like, I mean, not that I want to ask her that question because that's definitely going to be a tearjerker, but just to get your family's perspective, like somebody's family's perspective. I don't think that she and I have ever sat down and really talked about what that was like for her.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm a selfish person.
No, I don't think that that's necessarily the case. I just feel like perhaps in general, your family get-togethers have focused on more exciting and like happier times than necessarily the time when your sister was probably scared to flippin' death,
right?
Because you were that sick. And I think what's going to be interesting too is like from her perspective, being a healthcare professional who knows probably too much about some of what's going on. How does she still be your sister and sort of play the role of your family member who's supportive of you, but still knows all this stuff and wants to educate you about what's happening? Because it's hard to play both roles. It's really difficult to play both roles. And so I'm curious to talk to her about that, especially since she was going to school at the time, because this is like textbook come to life, you know?
It really was. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think it'll be interesting to talk to her about that. And I don't beat yourself up about not having this conversation before, because I think it's not something you talk about. I mean, you kind of just go, you both probably want to put it behind you and say, this is that thing that happened. And we both know it happened. We're both there.
I have thanked her. Now I have actually thanked her for that time, but I never really talked to her about what it was like for her.
Yeah, no, I think it's great that you thanked her, and I'm sure she appreciated it, but I'm sure she also is like, let's not talk about it. I'm really glad we're going to drag this up for her.
That's right. I'm going to make sure that she has a drink before she gets on the call, and, remember the time that I almost died? How was that like?
Yeah, let's talk about let's delve in deep.
Why don't you unpack that for me?
I think her colon prep is going to be shots, frankly.
Maybe we need theme music,
Oh, yeah. Exactly. Anytime you hear the little theme music, it's shot time.
Right.
Lord, oh my goodness. It's just going to be sloppy by the end. It's going to be bad.
No, we're going to be responsible.
We are, but that doesn't mean our guests are.
No.
We can just pretend we're doing shots and then see what happens.
But they have to provide their own, so they could just be shooting water for all we know.
That is true. I know. Stupid pandemic, means that unfortunately, and the fact that you and I don't even live in the same place. So it means
this is true. Although I would visit you. I would visit you to do this in person.
Oh my gosh, that'd be so much fun. I'm super excited. I think we're probably to the end of our original episode. I'm super excited. So I'm excited to bring more episodes to you guys. Our intention is to have these every single week. And we're going to be talking to you. We're going to try to get our guests focused on maybe a specific aspect of living with inflammatory bowel disease. And so if that's the tactic we take with somebody, we're definitely going to put it in the show notes so you can tell what we're going to be talking about. But
I feel like mostly we're going to be winging it though.
I do kind of feel like we're just going to, just talk to people. Just talk to our friends because it's going to be fun and we'll get a chance to get to know them.
It's funny and informative.
That's the intention. The problem is I think we find ourselves funnier than perhaps everybody else finds us.
This is true. Very true.
Oh dear. Well, with that being said, I think we've perhaps come to the end of our show. So Robin, I'm going to say cheers. Cheers to our first episode. And cheers to the Bowel Moments, the start of the Bowel Moments podcast. All right. Thanks everyone. Bye.